Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand, owner of the company Hornsvoden. As always, before we jump into the show, I do have to plug our Patreon, but stick with me because I do have a couple of really cool guest announcements. So if you can and want to support the show, please head over to Patreon/Nordic Mythology podcast. Starts from £3 a month and you get access to the entire back catalogue. So there's 270 episodes that you can't get anywhere else except via our Patreon. And yes, like I say, it's £3 a month. I think it's well worth the value for the quality of guests and scholars and information that we have on there. And it does support the show. The money goes directly back into the show to help us keep growing, get better equipment. It is incredibly beneficial. So if you can, please do go and check that out. You also get the Q&A episodes we get, which is a bonus episode every week with the guests. So you get a little extra nugget on top of the main show, and you get the smut episodes that me, Mags, and Claire do, which are a lot of fun, where we look at erotic amateur Viking literature, which is as much fun as it sounds. We tend to let our hair down, have a little drink, and it's just a good time. So go and check those out as well. But also, we have maybe the most exciting month ever in the history of the podcast when it comes to guests. I don't know how these all landed in 1 month. So you're going to get early access to these guests and the episodes via the Patreon. So we have Kai Faust coming on from Heilung straight after Heilung's last gig for a couple of years. So that's going to be a great guest. We have Julian Post Melby joining the show again. Anybody who's listened to his shows from the sagas of the ice know that they are absolutely incredible. We also have a gentleman called Tank Toltman. If you haven't seen his videos, he is huge on TikTok and Instagram. He's a bit of a personality. And then I think most exciting, which I got a lovely confirmation of today for our 300th episode, was Peter Franzen agreed to come join us on the podcast. So Finnish actor, and most people will know him as Harold Bluetooth from the Vikings TV show. He kindly is going to give us a few hours of his time, which I am super excited about. So if you want to get access to those episodes before anyone else, get in live, ask them your questions. Like I say, it's Patreon /Nordic Mythology podcast. If you can, then just a 5-star rating, positive review wherever you get your podcast helps us. But let's get into today's show. This is a really exciting one, and it's a topic that is new to me, and I think is new to the academic world. So first, I'm joined by my lovely co-host and in-house in-house archaeologist Mags Havgart. What a mouthful! That's because
Hi, everyone.
You know what, Mags? That's because I got scared. I was like, joined by my co-host, Mags. I was like, no, actually, I need to say in-house archaeologist. I don't want to be told
You're so
off.
sweet. You're so sweet that you're sticking with that.
Well,
it's
you
fun.
asked.
And I'm also very excited about today's episode because we've been talking about this topic for a while, Dan, and you've been gushing about this, and we're both equally like, what even is this topic? Mm-hmm. I'm so excited. Yeah. Not to freak you out, Felix, but that was a little...
setting the bar high.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So, that voice belongs to our guest, Felix Lummer, who's it's a second appearance on the show. And yeah, you told me this topic is a new one. I have no idea what to expect. So first and foremost, Felix holds a PhD in Old Nordic religion and belief from the University of Iceland, where he also teaches a course of the same name. He is the editor of an anthology entitled Emotions on the Fringes, published in 2024. Felix is also the series editor of the Old Norse Studies series with Trivent Publishing. His current research interests are Old Nordic beliefs and mythology, translation studies, emotions, especially of the supernatural, and what we're going to cover today, the Belliphonic. Felix, welcome, and maybe you tell us a little bit of what the Belliphonic is.
Well, thank you, Dan and Max, of course, for having me. Great to be here back with you. Well, the Belliphonic, what is it? If you want to...
It's a cool word.
It's a cool word, it is, yeah. Unfortunately, I cannot take claim to this. It has originated in 2015 with Doherty, who did a study on wartime Iraq and soldiers' experiences of it. And it's basically a study rooted in ethnomusicology. So the focus is, of course, on sounds and, battle din, if you want to have it. So the Belliphonic is basically a construction. That word does not exist anywhere except for when you create it. And Doherty did so. And it is basically the Latin bellum for war and the Greek phone for sound or noise. And you merge the two and you get sounds of war. Of course, Belliphonic sounds more metal, I would say. Mm-hmm. But so it's the sounds of war, as it were.
Sounds of war. That sounds, as an avid fantasy reader, I would say that sounds like the quintessential like fantasy novel title.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah,
it sounds really cool. But then I also have no idea what it actually is. I think that's kind of the excitement about it, because it sounds like such a good topic, like the sounds of war. And then I'm like, but what actually are the sounds of war?
Because I was wondering, before you get into it, I might be like completely off base here, but my academic brain immediately started going, okay, so what are we talking about here? Are we talking about like, are there, literary descriptions of sounds during war? Are we talking about like artifacts that could have made sounds during combat? Like, what are we talking about sounds associated with war that are either, depicted or described in literary sources? Like, what avenue are we talking? Are we talking all?
We're talking all. So the answer is yes.
Okay, cool.
So of course, unfortunately, I'm not an in-house archaeologist. That is one area that has eluded me throughout my studies. I had to take one class in archaeology, and I managed to pass it. So unfortunately, I'm very untypical if it comes to Old Nordic religion and belief, because most people assume that you're an archaeologist, or you do something with the Eddic poetry, right? And I'm like, I look into saga literature and folklore. So I'm a literary scholar. So for me, the Belliphonic revolves around words or the lack thereof. Mm-hmm. But of course, Max, as you said, yes, you can go into archaeology. And that is one of these things that, especially in Old Norse studies, the Belliphonic, that is something that I know one other person deals with so far, and I want to give a shout out to them, if I may. It's Pierre Bigot, who is in Bergen, and he does it with the Skaldic poetry. So I'm also quite happy to not have to deal with Skaldic poetry, because basically I think you need to be a linguist to do this, which of course I am not. Descriptions of the sound of war. So you would read really a narrative, say, for instance, the sagas, the king sagas. They are very prominent and very prolific in their output and descriptions of sounds of war. And then you would read, say, Sverris Saga, and then you can look at how lures would be used, when they would be used, what kind of descriptions follow them, right? The effects of specific sounds. You were talking, I think, not too long ago about Berserkir, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so of course, something that they do in order to get into the Berserksgangur is that they scream a lot, right? They howl, they bellow. The Old Norse term is grenja. So this would be something that could be considered as a Belliphonic.
Okay. So
really cool.
How many examples of Belliphonics are there? Because I guess, in text or in sagas, I guess it is important to describe the sound. But if you're telling, I don't know how it would have worked. If you were telling the story, through an oral tradition, you would kind of just make the sound, I guess, in a part of the performance, or you would have maybe instruments or drums or things around you to aid. So is it often just like actually written down?
So you're pointing your finger at the wound right there. You slightly stopped. You slightly stopped pouring salt into it. But yes, of course, this is one of the problems, right? Because sound is, of course, something that is a physical experience, and how would you transport this into the written medium, right? So you're bound in a way to words, and then of course what these words would do for the reader. So you're limited, at least for my avenue of research. We can delve into the archaeology later on if you want, but you're reading a word in a saga that of course reflects with you. And maybe if you are a more contemporary reader than we are, you might even, be able to know different tonalities of sounds. For instance, I had a talk on Sverri Saga, and the problem is the narratives don't tell you, for instance, what kind of tonality the lures or these trumpets would have had. They just say, okay, they were blown. Yeah, but they can't all be blown in the same manner to direct an army into different things, right? You need a different signal for a charge rather than for, disembarkation or for fleeing or for reorganizing, right? But we hardly ever get to know this. Mm-hmm. And strolling back a bit into the methodology, the text, you could layer it into different forms, right? You could say it is an intradiegetic thing. And intradiegetic means, it's the words or the sounds that are mentioned in the text, right? As you read it, somebody says, oh yeah, the war horns sounded, or something like this. Then you have an intradiegetic mention of a Belliphonic instance, very clearly. But you can also have it extradiegetic, right? Because you can say, the warhound sounded, and then by making the sound while you're performing the text, you're removing, of course, the sound from the text. Hence, it's extradiegetic. And then, and this is the tricky part, you might have a battle description in which there are no sounds described whatsoever, but you have, people that are engaged in combat. And of course, combat is not silent. But if you're reading saga descriptions, how often do you hear the wounded being mentioned lying on the floor screaming? How often do you hear, the whizzing of arrows, the clashing of swords? It is very terse if it is ever mentioned. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems that when you're dealing with written text is that you have to also think of the ambience, right? These maybe implicit diegetic sounds that are fundamental to every narrative scene, but that are not mentioned.
Why do you think they're not mentioned? Because I recently, for the first time in my life, became a reader. For the last year, I think I've read more books this year than I have my entire life, which is not. I'm quite ashamed to admit, but I'm getting there. And any modern novel, you have that full description of the act, the sound, everything is in there. And do you think that it lacks those sounds because maybe these were meant to go alongside a performance, and the sounds would be there anyway from the act or from the visual, and it's kind of the two go together?
One of the aspects is that most Belliphonic instances in saga literature are quite terse. So they would say, and then the armies clash, one army is defeated and flees. So it's like
very straight to the point.
It's very straight to the point, right? Yeah. It's like there is no embellishment. But of course, you know that when these armies clash, as in the term clash already, right? You would associate some kind of sound, some kind of battle din. But you are having no actual words that you could point yourself to. Mm-hmm. And that is the unfortunate thing.
But is it almost then kind of like it's the sounds aren't, because the text is so, like you said, terse and kind of straight to the point, clear cut in a way, and there is this clear lack of waxing poetic or embellishing the text. Would it then, would descriptors of those sounds perhaps be seen as kind of superfluous, because you've already described what happens, so why get into it? Because you've been given kind of, they clashed, done, moving on.
Yeah, I wouldn't know, of course, right? I can't put myself into the mind of,
obviously, that's all of our problems.
That's all of our problems, right? If I just could teleport myself back 800 years, my problems would be solved. But the brevity of some of these accounts certainly does not help. But at other times, it feels as though people would understand the noise of battle, right?
Right. So it's like, why would you mention it? Because they would know.
Exactly. You get this oftentimes, I think, in sagas of Icelanders, right? When you are having very limited kind of encounters, which, depending on your definition of war, might not even be considered war, but more like kinetic altercations or something like that.
Kinetic altercations. I'm going to steal that. I love that.
What a lovely way to put it.
Well, I mean, you might have this. There is this one famous scene. I forget which saga it is, but it's in Saga of the Icelanders where they are assaulting a house and they try to break down the door, and then the defenders opening the door and the guy standing in front of it gets pierced by a spear. And the only thing that he says is like, "Oh yeah, this type of spears is apparently trendy again," and then he dies. So it is like. You of course know that there are sounds involved, and I would reckon that Icelanders might have known what it sounded like, to assault a farm, or at least have heard tales of it. Mm-hmm. But again, then this is the account that you are left with. So one of these struggles is really in getting familiar with all the possible sounds that could have been existing on the battlefield, what sounds they would have access to, and so on.
Could I guess, would it depend on in what context these were written down as well, in a sense of, were they written to mainly just record rather than entertain, in which case maybe that's why they're a little more direct and to the fact, because it's like this is what happened, rather than if it was performative and written down in a performance way, you would expand on all those sounds and smells and bring that entertainment into it. But it's not needed if it's just kind of like, oh yeah, well, fact based.
Yeah, I mean, in for instance, Sverre Saga, we see this. Sverre Saga, at least in part, has been composed by a friend of King Sverre, on the behest of King Sverre. So there's, of course, ample opportunity for transgression on the text and the truthfulness of the events described. But one of the things that is described is there is a sea battle between King Sverre and his rival King Magnus, where, the battle hangs in the balance. And then, of course, King Sverre goes forth from, basically from the back towards the prow of the ship, because the king would have been on the back. And then the saga states that he performs an entire sequence, the Choras Alma Dei, or Domini, which, if you Google it, lasts for roughly 5 minutes without protecting himself. And you're like, yeah, sure, this happened, right? You're going to where the fight is thickest, to the prow of the ship, of course, where the two ships would have met, where the fighting would have been the fiercest, and you were just, standing there doing your sequence without protecting yourself.
I've seen that in a lot of Hollywood movies, actually.
That brought me to mind of like that one scene in one of the Pirates movies where like that one commander who's obviously going to go down the ship, he just like walks very slowly down from like the aft of the ship, like while the entire ship is like exploding around him, and he gets like hit with no shrapnel, like nothing. He's just fine.
Well, it's sagas, what is it, like Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like this.
Or in most battle scenes, there's this the hero and the antagonist, and they have like a moment across the battle where everyone kind of freezes and they look at each other, and they have like a solo battle where nobody else gets involved, because in reality one of them would just get poked from behind by the rest of the ongoing melee, but it's kind of an isolated incident inside of a chaotic battle.
Is this, a saga example of actual plot armor?
You know, I mean depending on how you want to see it, could be even more, right? It could be even divine intervention, because King Magnus gets wounded shortly thereafter and his troops think him dead and they start to flee. And then he's basically crawling up again and is like, okay, guys, I'm not actually dead. Please continue the fighting. But then it's, of course, too late. The saga doesn't
scratch.
It is but exactly right. Like the Black Knight from Monty Python. I'm completely fine. Yeah. but of course, although the saga doesn't make the connection, it doesn't outright state that King Sverre singing the hymn basically leads to King Magnus's wounding. It is suggested by basically happening like 2 sentences thereafter.
Like it's not actually saying it, but it's also like not saying it.
Exactly. So you're left to your own conclusions in that regard.
Mm-hmm. That's fun. But would then that song be okay? This is me getting like very, very kind of annoying about stuff because I love getting into details. Would then that song be qualified as a Belliphonic sound?
Yes, because it happens in the arena, right, of battle. Right. It is in this, again, kinetic altercation environment.
Right.
just to use this term more. Mm-hmm. And as such, it would, of course, belong to that.
So any sound that happens in that arena or in that situation would be...
Yeah, you could say this, right? I mean, of course, it depends on how far and wide you want to cast your net.
Sure.
For instance, when you have standards and they might be, blowing in the wind, that they make also sounds, but how much are they impacting on the battlefield? Of course, they are contributing to the actual soundscape of the battlefield.
Sure.
But again, how much do you weigh them over, for instance, signaling sounds or the actual sound of combat or of men being wounded or killed or of horses, charging?
It's a fascinating topic because I think probably most people underappreciate how war might sound, I guess, because it's not something we see, for the most part. I guess we only really see it in movies and it doesn't translate. And I know it's not
thankfully and luckily for us.
Yeah. And I know it's not a 1-to-1, but I don't know if either of you ever fired a gun.
No, I've been in the vicinity, but I haven't fired one myself.
So I went to Prague on a stag do and we got given like a pistol, like a 9mm and a AK-47. It was like a lad thing to do down at a shooting range.
Okay, cool. Because I was like, what was the context here, Dan? Just like open street.
No. It was a shooting range. It was all above board. But I did not realize how fucking loud a gun is until I shot one myself. And I consider myself fairly brave and macho and manly and all these things. But when I pulled the trigger, I literally, not literally shit myself, actually. I'm going to take that back. But I I was terrified, just mainly by the noise. Obviously, you get like the kick, but just the sheer noise that you're hit with. And then same with like the AK-47, like the noise of other people firing it. And I was just like, what the fuck is that? And then things only really get bigger from that in kind of a modern sense. But I imagine you can still apply that back to, warfare of swords, people being, swords clattering, shields smashing together, people screaming, trying to somehow hear the orders of the people in charge above all else, the injured. There's all these things that have got to be going on that would just make for a horrendous soundtrack.
Yeah, and of course you have to also consider how much your armor impairs your hearing, as well as other sensory, right, factors. Of course, now if you're thinking about more the continental medieval period, you have Agincourt, for instance, and you see all these French and British men-at-arms in their mail armor or like plate armor. Their helmets, right, they are almost closed. So how much would they really have heard? Or, how much would these sounds have been distorted to them? And something similar could also be applied to the Old Norse However, of course, helmets might slightly work differently there. But again, this is then, of course, when the archaeological aspects come in, right? Because then this is where finds become very important. How would, for instance, swords have sounded when they clash onto one another? I mean, we have, of course, swords, and we have lures and so on and so forth. So we know at least some part, but I'm not actually sure if somebody went out there and, recorded an actual mock battle, say, right? You have a lot of reenactment groups, I think. If you were to contact them, it's be like, oh yeah, it's have like a 20 on 20 and just, you are standing there with, recording devices and just record how much noise they are making. That would already be very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually brings to mind, I remember it was a while ago now, several years, but I remember as part of like this activity day at the Viking Ship Museum here in Oslo, there was a reenactment group who did like a mock battle, and they weren't really that many when I think back. I think there were maybe like 5 to 10 of them, and a lot of it was like one-on-one, just like two going at it. And it was very noisy, just like also not even, because one thing is like metal hitting metal, right? With like swords hitting each other, but also just the sound of axes or swords hitting the shields was also really loud. Mm-hmm. Like that thwack sound of metal hitting wood was also like, you could hear it from, I did not need to stand in front of that crowd to hear exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
I guess there would be shouting, because intimidation is a huge part of war. So if you can be louder and bigger and scarier and kind of get that edge. And it reminds me of, so a friend of the podcast, Ed Gamester, does the Mythos Ragnarok, which is a wrestling theater show based around Norse mythology. And I remember the first time I ever saw wrestling in person. I grew up loving wrestling, like the golden era of WWE, which is quite problematic when you look back at it today. But at the time, I loved it. And the first time I saw it, Ed showed the noise of just two people just hitting each other. And yeah, it's performative and there's slaps, but the hit, just two people hitting each other and hitting the deck was one of the straight away the things that stood out to me. Was like, oh wow, this is louder and just more impactful because of that sound.
Yeah. I remember when I first moved to Iceland, I had a friend who was very into UFC.
Okay.
And he invited me over for a watch party, and I did not know what the heck I was getting myself into.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So, of course, one of the first instances, you just hear like, pum, and the guy just like knock out and falls on the floor, and you're like, you can feel the force with which these punches are, transmitted.
Yeah.
It is quite impressive, yeah.
And I guess maybe that stands out more to us because it is an uncommon thing. To kind of put it back to what you said earlier, it's very foreign for us to see, for the most part, physical violence. We don't really see it in our life unless maybe you train in something like that. Most of us get to luckily get on by without it.
Hopefully.
But when we do
Christ,
hear
how
it,
lucky are we?
Yeah. But when you do hear it, it stands out. But back in the Viking Age, it probably wasn't that uncommon. So you did kind of know these sounds. You did know these noises, and it was just assumed that you would kind of get it.
Yeah. I mean, again, rolling the curtain back a bit to methodology, right? When you look into like sound studies and people dealing with soundscapes, and of course, when you're in a battle environment, you are dealing with the soundscape of battle. You are having a lot of these environmental factors in it already, and this is willingly done so. So there was an American, Murray Schafer was his name. He has done a lot of stuff in the 70s on soundscapes. And of course, the scape part comes from landscape. Mm-hmm. And he was a sound engineer, but he was very interested in how architecture impacts our daily life and the sound environment that we are traversing and negotiating every day. Mm-hmm. And from there, of course, when you're using these soundscape ideas and you're moving it to a battlefield, then of course, how varied is the landscape in Norway, right? So even if you are thinking about the same battle, just one is on the water or in the fjord, the next one is at the coastline, the next one is in a valley, you are getting, of course, ambient sounds that are, again, different to what the other is, right?
100%. And also, like, I have a family cabin very close by the fjord, and something I was reminded of this summer that I'd almost completely forgotten is how well noise carries over water. So one thing is being on the water yourself, but like we can hear conversations from the island closest to our cabin. We're also on an island. Like if it's quiet enough, people on 2 different islands can shout to each other and be heard. Yeah. Because of how well the water transmits those audio waves. And it also then, because that also kind of gets me thinking about, what could I call this? Not secondhand warfare, but like experiencing warfare. Like what if you are at a coastline and you just hear the sounds of this battle? If it's a water, like sea-based, fjord-based battle, I mean, it's got to be crazy.
Yeah, or like when you're in a siege. I mean, if you're an inhabitant of a village that is sieged, you're also, subjected to all kinds of noises.
Yeah.
And anybody watching will just see me kind of go into my own little head there for a second. I was like staring up thinking, because I'd be fascinated to know if anybody, because then the sound is just another tool if you could use it to benefit you in war. And I wondered whether, certainly I guess in an older setting, because today we can amplify sounds and really kind of take advantage of it, but back in an olden day setting, whether the battlefield or the place that you choose could be influenced by the sound that maybe is reverberated back, just to make things, because if you can intimidate and kind of pick an area where even if you get like an echo or something where is, I guess the geography and the lay of the land is probably most important because you want to have that advantage. But if there is an opportunity to kind of have that sound presence where you can appear bigger than you are, it's something that I guess all animals do. And they say if a bear attacks you, makes everything big and scream. It's that kind of presence, though, isn't it? Just kind of have that bigger than you are mentality.
Yeah, most certainly. And of course, especially again in the King sagas, because we have so good descriptions of battles therein, you are getting that descriptions that, 2 battle lines, before they engage in, hand-to-hand combat, they would throw insults and banter at one another, right? You have in Ólafssaga Helga, you have the description of a war cry being used before, the initiation of battle. So of course you have these kinds of sounds, using just your sword and your shield and, to make some noise, clapping the one together in order to boost your morale or intimidate the enemy, of course. And to some extent, you have tapped into another interesting aspect there, Dan, and that is who has access to sound and what sound, right? Because when I'm talking about lures, that is a royal thing. Not everybody gets to use a lure. That is something of social standard.
What is a lure?
A lure is like, the Roman carnix or something like this very elongated trumpets that are in this almost S-shaped thing.
Yeah.
In the Bronze Age, they were like that, made from bronze. When we are dealing with the medieval period, they would be tubular devices made of wood, without any finger holes, so the tonal range is quite limited. But again, you might then get into this kind of notion where certain social elites have access to certain sounds, or maybe even, political parties, religious allegiances could be expressed by sound. So only by hearing the sound, you would already know with whom you are dealing to some extent. And then, of course, when you are a king or a high royal retainer that is allowed to use or tap into this kind of sonic currency, as it were, That, of course, allows you to, on the one hand, create some kind of social identity because you are setting yourself apart from certain groups, aligning yourself with other groups, but also it allows you to project your social standing and your power onto the battlefield simply by using that kind of sound that other people just simply don't have any access to.
I guess that could be another form of intimidation as well. If you have if you have this sound that other people don't, you kind of, I guess, first of all, make people question what is that noise, but also it could just be a signal of, oh shit, that's the king, or that's somebody really important, because we don't have that. And it makes you, because I guess a lot of war is getting people to second guess themselves so you can take advantage. And if you're on the battlefield and you hear from the other side maybe a sound like that is synonymous with an elite or an elite group of people, if it makes people go, fucking hell, they're so-and-so is on their side now, it kind of makes you start to think maybe we're not winning this, and then doubt creeps in, and it's all part of warfare.
Sure. It's on the one hand, it's projection of power. On the other hand, it's deception. It's intimidation. It's all a great game, isn't it? When it comes down to it, you want to make yourself stronger than you really are and intimidate your foe best into just surrender the battlefield without any bloodshed. I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. But that is part of it, because we have this image, or there's this image put out into popular media that the Vikings were very savage and forthcoming when it comes to war, and kind of bloodthirsty and almost craving it, particularly this idea that they want to die so they can go to Valhalla, this very image that's put out there. But in reality, when you think about it, they don't want to die. And also, if you're a king, you don't want your soldiers to die, because you have to now find more soldiers and you have to train more soldiers. So if you can help it, you would quite like them to stay alive. So if you can end the battle and win the war without having to fight, you would do that. It's not that they just kind of wanted to fight.
Or if you can just, use a ruse and sneak yourself into the flank or the rear of the enemy and then just overrun them, that would also help you. And of course, if you are a king and you have very high-skilled retainers that fight on your behalf, there's a lot of currency that goes into these people, right? A lot of maintenance, a lot of resources. Time.
It's expensive.
It's very expensive. And of course, everyone that gets...
in all manners of speaking. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you want these guys because they are darn good fighters. But on the other hand, every loss is sorely felt. And it is, of course, not... I mean, we hear that quite a lot in the saga literature, that then people are just getting, oh yeah, so this town is besieged. Okay, we are now inside. We have to break out of the siege. So you there, you go and fight on with us now. Try to break the siege, right? So there might at times not even be a choice for people. But then again, it is just, oh, you just are the unlucky villager that happened to be besieged, and now you have to save your village to some extent, right? So not every warrior is as important as the next, I would say.
Sure.
And some are more expendable, right? The red shirts from Star Trek, but
very nice Star Trek reference there.
The only one that I know, really, because I'm more of a Star Wars kind of guy. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love that so much. But so meaning that, you got to, use that reference, I guess. You absolutely have stormtroopers, but you also have a lot of Jedis, meaning that not that they're magical, but meaning that you wouldn't necessarily just chuck them into battle, but you do also have groups of people that are sometimes just chucked into battle, regardless of how they might feel about it.
Sure. There are, especially in maritime combat, you have, especially on the King's ship, let's just take it to keep the stormtrooper elite soldier kind of thingy going. At the prow of the ship, because this is where the ship would meet first and initially, you would have, of course, your best guys. And depending on, the narratives again, these would be the stabbuar, so the people that are on the front, on the stave, right? And they are your best, your finest. These are the cream of the crop. Behind then, of course, again, depending on which narrative you're reading, then might be the berserkir. And then you are getting the casual retainers, and then you would get, your slingers, your bowmen, and so on, your archers. So even then, you might see that in the battlefield, or on the battlefield, you have a social hierarchy. And of course, with that follows, again, a certain sonic ecology, if one might call that. Again, thinking into how, for instance, the berserkir again use these animal vocalizations in order to transform or put themselves into this berserk's fury. And of course, the king, who has access to lures, who might, yell commands at you, and they might have, again, a jarl below them who might have... It's, again, in Sverri Saga, unfortunately, and so far the only instance that I found, there is a guest lure, so basically like a guest trumpet for one special occasion, that a retainer comes with his own army, and then they are handed a guest lure so that they keep command of their own retinue within the larger confinement of the army and of the battle, which is also, again, playing into this, like, who has access to and control of sound, and how is this stratified?
Yeah. It's got me thinking about war as a whole, and probably in different ways than I ever have, because now I'm thinking, I wonder if people ever made deals with others, like, come and join the battle, be on our team, but like that, have a guest lure, and it's like, well, we'll just be there for numbers, so we look bigger and more intimidating, and you'll be like the last in if we need you, but we kind of won't call you unless, and maybe that's like a deal of like, come and join, but your guys will probably not have to join and not get injured. And I wonder if that kind of deal ever happened, of like, you guys, just be there make the numbers up, so we look really intimidating, but we'll only call you in if you have to.
Yeah, might be interesting to speculate. Or like Gandalf, right? Look to the east on the fifth day or something like this. And then, your friends charge in on the flank just because, you made the right deals and you get the right people in. Mm-hmm. Sure. But again, a lot of these things can be impacted or influenced by sound. And again, as you put it there, it might, if you're just thinking about putting the numbers in order to give, the body of the army maybe more voice or something like this, how much would one then be talking about some kind of sonic warfare even? Again, with this kind of subterfuge, demoralization that kicks in, right? As you said, we hear the lure of the king. It's like, maybe I'm not so into with all this uprising thing, guys. Maybe I just, my potatoes are on the stove or something like that. I don't know. It's just
But even for me, like going back to when I played rugby, like we were always told, like, when you're warming up, make a lot of noise, be vocal, be like really chatty, make sure you're kind of enthusiastic. Yeah, doing everything enthusiastically, like, we're really up for this. And you're kind of getting in their heads before the game even starts. So like, we're not here to fuck around. We're like here. And we used to pick up on it. Like, if people were really quiet, we'd literally say, they're really quiet in the warm-up. They don't want to be here. It's a Saturday. Maybe it's a little bit cold. We're like, they don't want to be here. And it is, even sounds have that, like, psychological warfare. You're just like, straight away, we're going to get on top of these earlier because they're not up for it.
Thinking about rugby now, just like a slight comment on the side. It's like, have you ever seen the hakas of the All Blacks? My God.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Oh, so amazing.
They're incredible.
It gives me goosebumps, but it is, something to that effect, surely.
Mm-hmm. Well, they are obviously like a war dance, are they? They've just been brought into a rugby setting, and it would be terrifying if you can, if you come across somebody who is like, it adds that religious or like ritual setting to it as well. Particularly, I guess if you're, let's take it to a Nordic setting again, and if we ascribe to Roderick Dale, who's coming on again soon, has the idea of like the berserkers maybe having something like a haka, like that's what takes them into that trance, is that like ritual kind of like war dance akin thing that you kind of gets everybody going, which we see across like warrior cultures. If you were, let's say, Anglo-Saxon and you'd never seen something like this before, and then you have this group of people, whether they wear bearskins or not doesn't really matter, but if they did and they were kind of having this ritualistic experience that you've never seen before and seems to be having like this almost out of body trance like thing, you would, especially in a time where magic is probably a lot more believed than it is today, people believe that they can actually embody and maybe a spirit or an animal or a god or whatever. You kind of just go, actually, wait a minute.
I just imagine like these two like foot soldiers standing like all the way in the front, just like giving each other the side eye, like, what the fuck have we gotten into? What is happening? Why are we here? I want to go home. I want some cocoa. Not that they had cocoa because chocolate wasn't the thing yet, but
if you're a scout and you saw like something like that and you went back to your general and you're like, I just saw like a bunch of like guys and maybe women having this ritual experience, and they seem really scary and almost animalistic. And that's got to, and you've got to describe that then to people. And you're like, that's really, do we really want to go and fight these?
Right, and you're an Anglo-Saxon dad of 5, and you're like, maybe I'm not that invested anymore.
Yeah. Too many mouths to feed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I had to do some laundry and do the groceries, and my wife, she's really been
still
on my back lately.
Still haven't fixed the fence over there. Like, exactly. Who's going to share the sheep? Like,
I need to get some stones for the fence. Yeah, when we go through the fen back on my way home. Yeah, it's just like, I can't, guys. Sorry.
Actually,
But with the Berserker now, you would. This is again something that is quite interesting that you are saying there. I mean, regardless of whatever performative aspects they would have used or not. If we are going back again to this soundscape kind of thing, something that Murray Schafer has also proposed is the sound mark. And if you again cut the sound and just use the mark, you again with landmark, right? Again, this thing. However, what he refers to when he talks about sound mark is that it is a community sound that carries a specific meaning within a community. Of course, then it depends on how you define a community and whatnot.
Sure.
But if we were to think of Berserkir, for me, literary, I think other people might be more with the real or archaeological Berserkir. You are having again this kind of vocalizations, and it is the majority of terms. I've collected them, and then I'm about to write a paper on them. But the term that is used is again this adgrenia, to howl, to bellow, so very animal-like. And in certain descriptions, the most descriptions of sagas in which the Berserkir that are mentioned that transform or bring about the Berserksgangur onto themselves. In most instances, the Berserksgangur is not even mentioned. It is just the sound. So the sound alone is a narrative cue. People understand when these figures are described as Berserkir or later on as Vikings, or referencing Artgrim's talk as Blaumen later on in even younger sagas. the adgrenia, the vocalizations alone suffice for the reader to understand what has happened. And as such, again, sounds serve as narrative cues for the transformation that is taking place, but also because it is specific to the Berserkir, it creates a sense of community, of communal identity. Everybody that uses that particular sound with that particular effect could, in theory, be considered as forming part of that kind of community, which again plays into social strata, hierarchy, interplay.
That's really interesting. Where, like, especially when you consider it from like a literary perspective.
Yes.
That sounds that effectively cannot be transmitted through a text in the same way. They can only be hinted at, just like most visual things. But I think especially sound, it's still used as a narrative tool.
Pretty much so.
That's so cool.
Pretty much so, yeah.
Yeah.
That got me thinking, like, how do you describe a sound without saying it sounds like this other thing? It's a visual thing, if you get to describe a cup, you could kind of say it's cylindrical, it's hollow, it holds things. You can kind of say that, but if it was just like this, fucking, how do you describe that?
Exactly. And my personal perception of that sound might differ from yours as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how full your glass is, the pitch changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is, of course, one of these problems, because sound is a human experience, a personal experience to some extent, but also a physical thing, right? It is literally, it's like transmissions of vibrations of atoms that your ear picks up. And then the bones in your ear form into electrical signals that your brain then picks up on and interprets. How are you supposed to convey this in a written form? And you're having this problem both sides. Yes, Max? I didn't mean to.
No. Sorry, no.
Okay, no.
I was just taking a breath. My bad.
Sorry, because when you're writing about this, not only when you're reading the sagas or whatever records that you're currently studying, but also when you're writing about this. For instance, if I were to write about the sound of a lure as an academic paper, and I want to publish this academic paper, how can I convey the tonality of a lure, even just in without the battlefield sound, just basically like in a studio? How can I convey this in the paper? I just cannot insert an MP3 file or something like this.
Would that you could, yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe if the journal is online only, then you can have a link and you can click on it.
Yeah, sure.
But in the early days of apps, when I had my iPhone 3 or something like that, there was an app in which you could read fantasy novels, and certain words were hyperlinked. And then you could click on these hyperlinks and it would actually make, for instance, a sound, then, a dragon was flying. And then you could say, click on the dragon. And then it was like, oh, something like this. And then swords clashing. And then you had an MP3 of swords clashing. Nice. I found this quite ingenious.
What app was that? That's so cool.
Yeah, that is cool. And I guess you also get, like you said, sounds through the ear, but there are sounds that just reverberate through the body as well. We've all probably experienced it, like when it's a loud enough thing.
Well, don't tell me how many times I've stood too close to the speaker at a metal concert, right?
Exactly. There could be no like audible sound, but you could just have, you could be deaf, but stood in a room next to the speaker like that, and you would know that there is sound being played because it just is hitting the body. And that has to be, again, something that can be used.
Yes, there are, especially regarding World War I, there are quite a lot of studies that are dealing with, for instance, the effect of artillery. How people say that not only even the impact of the grenades exploding and such, but only hearing the faint distant drum of artillery being fired makes their guts churn. And I think this can be both, right, like the emotional, the stress kind of response that what is happening, but on the other hand, it could also be just the shock wave that then travels to you, and you feel actually like the physical gut churning.
Yeah, I remember when I was hiking. This was years and years and years and years ago. I was down south somewhere and hiking with the dogs, and there were 2 fighter jets that flew over, probably on like a training mission, but they were really low. I was quite high up, and they were very low.
Oh, that's gotta have been real loud.
And they whipped across, and obviously, and I've never heard like anything like it. It was just one of those moments where you're hit with this noise, and they're going that kind of quick that you're just like, what the fuck is that? Like, you have no idea what's going on. It stuns you to a degree. But then I'm thinking, how can I describe this to you?
It's almost like the sound wave slaps you in the face.
Like
it feels like a physical thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, there's no way that I can describe how loud this actually was. Just I can be really enthusiastic and be like, it was really loud, but you can't appreciate it until unless you experience just the all-encompassing like thing of this plane whipping over, and it was intimidating as well.
Yeah, sure. You need to be stood there in order to really appreciate it, right? This is again something. How do you, in your subjectivity as a human being, transmit sound experiences of your own to others? Because again, the next guy might just have zoned out, and his audio experience is complete different to what you are experiencing. It is a tricky thing, that, unfortunately, but it also makes it very interesting, I suppose.
Yeah.
At least
so,
to me.
I suppose so, and also
do.
But so, like, how does this then what are the things that you look for specifically when you're doing your work into this? Like, what are the traces that you look for? What are the examples?
Personally,
yeah.
Oh, well, I'm of course.
If you feel comfortable talking about it,
I don't see why I shouldn't.
Unless, like, it's just me being the academic here, being like, I don't know if you don't have to talk about stuff that's currently like unpublished or something. I'm just like very curious.
I have talked about all of this year already, so technically speaking,
okay, cool. Yay!
Yay! So I'm currently dealing with 2 things. One is the use of these lures, which you had very nicely in interaction in the chat, right? How to spell them. But in the King sagas, and how they're used, for what they're used, and when they're used. Because I'm also very interested in the chronology of events. This is something that also popped up in the chat. Because a battle you might think of as just the clash of people. But you, of course, have stages beforehand and stages after that. And of course, these are not happening in total silence, right? You might, muster your troops, gather your troops. You might want to spy on the enemy. You might want to move your troops around. And this might all be done with some type of signals. Some of them might be, audio signals. Then you might have, if it is a set battle, the armies are standing, abreast, and then you might get some banter. You might have your lord, for death and the Orohirim, and like this very epic scene in Lord of the Rings, right? Something like this.
Today is not that day. No,
exactly.
No.
Yep. One of the best scenes ever. And you might get an arousal speech, right? It's like the king or the lord that you are fighting for shows you that he is actually present and reminds you of your cause and, the justness, and might, humiliate the enemy by using certain slurs or dehumanizing them or what have you. And then you might just stand there for an hour, because nobody wants to make the first move. And then you're starting off with people maybe going into this gray zone kind of thing between the lines, and might start bantering, might start, casting insults at one another, trying the other army to maybe, provoke into some sort of unplanned attack, or maybe, again, this kind of deception kind of thing. So this is what I'm looking at. And on the one hand. And on the other hand, I am currently very interested in how sound can create, at least literary depictions of sound can create a sense of community. And I've looked at the Berserkir, hence I've been circling back to them and the Adgrenia stuff and so on and so forth. So there, of course, I'm looking at a connection between Berserkir, the Berserksgangur, and sound. And how oftentimes, for instance, the Berserksgangur is just mentioned, oh yeah, these are two brothers, they are called such and such, they are Swedes, and at times they happen to have, the Berserksgangur before them. Or are they actually sounds rather than just mere descriptions of it? And what
is it Berserksgangur?
Sorry, Berserksgangur, it's like the Berserk's fury, the Berserk's wrath.
Oh, okay. So that is like the
old
enhanced state, I guess.
Well, I mean, of course, it is that state of battle fury, or that the Berserkir are known for. I'm sorry, I thought.
We have a fantasy series going here, because we have Sounds of War, and then we have Wrath of the Berserker, and I mean, this is getting pretty good.
So that's the term for when they're in this kind of
in their mood, I
feel like we're one step off one of the smut novels that we do, like the Wrath of the Berserker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on how you want to understand this kind of state the Berserkir are in. Because of course there have been varying theories put forward. I think, Dan, you just recently made a short notion about berserkers using some kind of mushrooms in order to, or some psychedelic drugs in order to, right, put themselves into the state. I think of this more like an emotional state rather than a trance-like state, as I know other people do, because it is something that is transmitting rage, and as such it puts you in what has been termed a domain of effort, which is very sciencey speaking, for it means it allows you to react to certain events or act, right? So you are screaming, you are shouting, as you say, then before the rugby match, right? You are working yourself up, right? Mm-hmm. And getting the testosterone boiling. And once you think you have peaked, it's like, okay, yes, like now I can do this. Now I don't need to fear whatever that thing is, war, and whatever this particular battle is that I have to face now, and the people that I have to kill and to maim, or maybe, being killed or maimed myself. And once you have this emotional state in which you have, of course, set yourself by, for instance, sound, screaming, right? For instance, the haka, or being very noisy or causing a ruckus, then, of course, you might be able to cope with certain exertions better than without it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of a tangent, but I kind of love the, I'm not saying that those interpretations are necessarily without their merit, but I do love kind of how tightly some cling to this has to have been some sort of like hallucinogenic state or like trance or something. I'm like, I might be, not giving enough credit where credit is due here, but I do get the impression that people who keep for lack of a better term, harping on that sort of interpretation hasn't necessarily been in an emotional state before that allows you to do certain things without there being any necessarily substances involved. I'm like, I'm going to sound like the worst sibling in the world here, but I know that my sister, especially when we were younger, had the ability to put me in an emotional state where whoa. Like I could do superhuman things based on the fury that she would put me in.
I'm unfortunately I'm a soul child, so I can't feel with that. But I've heard others. I can yeah.
It doesn't necessarily just have to be sibling things, but like I feel like, you know, it that speaks to an experience of having necessarily not had the opportunity, I guess, to experience being in an emotional state where you almost feel like you're on something, even though you know that you're not, but you are producing some sort of like too much adrenaline, or like where it allows you to be more engaged or more focused or more like do things that you otherwise necessarily wouldn't think that you would do.
Yeah. For instance, coming back to the rugby, I played American football, the softcore version of rugby, I suppose, here in Iceland. So technically speaking, I was on the national team. There you go. And,
hey!
Wow.
Well, I mean, come on, right?
No, don't you devalue it.
National team's just still a national team.
Right. I would take it.
The thing is also, especially when you're looking NFL, right? How much in these huddles is done by screaming, by shouting, by, you know, some kind of rhythmic performance in order to, and I think NFL players especially, they seem, at least when you're following some interviews that they do, they seem of the perception that they do better, right? That this is not a game, but rather that there is some further gravitas to what it is that they are doing. And so, of course, you know, in sports as well as in war, I reckon sound carries this specific undertone, these undercurrents of sociological and emotional kind of effect. If I do make sense.
No,
yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely, because even, I guess I've been thinking of this on a very macro level of just like the loud, big banging sounds. Whereas even just, like I said, like throwing insults or just a talk. How many times has somebody just spoken to you and either, like Mike said, whipped you up into a frenzy where you're just so angry you're not thinking about what you're doing, or just inspirational and you actually think, actually, you know what, I feel better. I can do this. And these also fall into the sounds of just having a human like conversation, I guess. In
certainly, you know, the intonation of certain things, the stressing, right? How do you know that a comment was an insult or just a tongue in cheek? But thinking again about sounds and these minute or maybe more personal sounds. One of the organizers for the session that I had at Leeds this year, he did some archaeological research. He went out he didn't dig, but he went out into a museum of a specific battlefield in the middle of Germany in the 1320s or so. This was fought. And what they found was this one warrior that got killed, this one knight. He had on his armor 2 tiny bells. Literally, like belts that you would have on, you know, today's your cat's collar or something like this. Really tiny bell. It's like, why would you have these 2 tiny bells on your girdle? What purpose does it have? Do you even hear in your, you know, full metal plate helmet? Do you even hear these bells? It's very intriguing. These.
Yeah. Why would you have them?
Exactly. So there must be a reason then. Maybe it's something, you know, that his child gave them. I don't know. It's just like speculation right here. But it need not be that it is all these grandiose sounds of horns and of swords clashing. It can be very personal items, and also items that you might not presume. It's like I wouldn't go onto a medieval battlefield and expect to find tiny bells. Which makes it also, again, it's very peculiar, this.
Yeah, that's like, I love archaeological stuff like that, where you find things and you cannot dispute the fact that they exist, where they exist, in the context that they exist in, but you're still stuck there like, what am I looking at? What is going on? What is happening right now?
How can I make sense of this? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny though, because I guess in an archaeological sense, when you find something, I guess every archaeologist, when they're on a dig or a find, they want it to be really important. And of course, like every find is important, but there must be that hope that it's going to be this.
Can I be
changing
totally
thing that's just amazing? Go on, Max.
No, I just wanted to be like a really annoying ass for a second and say, yes, but I think the most baseline wish for an archaeologist when we're out excavating is just to find something, because sometimes there have been surveys and you don't even know if you'll end up with anything. So you start with just something, just a little piece, just something, and then as soon as you start finding things, I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe, but I think I don't necessarily know if I want it to be important, but I want it to be interesting. It's interesting to find interesting things. Be like, wait, what is this?
But I think there's probably that natural want to ascribe like importance to things that are found.
I don't know if that's natural, Dan, or is that social programming?
I don't know. I think it's probably natural. I think that if people
sorry, I couldn't help myself.
I think if people find things, they just naturally want it to be like important.
Yeah,
maybe not, but
the point being none of that. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
There are so many things that are found that probably have no importance, no story. Those bells may have just been something that he always wore on his belt that have no real significance to the battle. It's just a thing that's there because he picked them up in a market because they were pretty or something and just put them on because he's like, this is cool. But we look at it and go like, why are these there? And really it could be like, they're just cool. Liked them.
I liked them, yeah.
They had no meaning to war.
I found them stylish. Just want to be fleek. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want it to be a bit different, not like the other guys.
Yeah, I find that so. But that's that's true, Max. I think that we look. So I'm doing a fancy dress at the weekend it's Whitby Pirate Weekend.
Cool.
And so in Whitby, there's just like a pirate weekend. It's actually quite sweet. So it's put on by the RNLI, the Royal Life. What's RNLI stand for? It's like the lifeboat. So the the Royal Lifeboat something. I'm going to quickly Google. But yeah, it's like the Royal National Lifeboat Institute. So it's like a kind of like a charity weekend where they're raising money for lifeboats around the country for people who unfortunately get stuck in a position where you need them. And I'm one of these people that if I'm doing fancy dress, I take it really serious. So I'm sat doing hours of research. I'm like, well, what did pirates actually wear? Trying to find paintings of pirates and how accurate is this? Because I just can't help myself. And I'm like looking for all these little things. And then I just I was sat looking and I was thinking to myself, like, all pirates or like pirate wear, and it probably fits back into the Viking as well. Like by modern standards, by people looking today, all probably looks quite camp and quite like flamboyant because everything was about being showy. And I was looking at like paintings of pirates with like these big turtleneck with frills like hanging out, and like everything's like silk and it's all like, being very showy of how much money you have and feathers in the hats and bright colors. And same with in the Viking Age, you have like this big show, and it was just so fascinating how like by today's standard, you'd look back at that and people be like, that's very kind of like flamboyant and a bit different. But at the time,
kind
it's
of
like
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, but like at the time, that was the thing, wasn't it? It's like, look what I can have. Look at these bright colors, these big frills, these big like thing. And whereas like today, there'd be some people that would see that quite negative, and it was really interesting. That it's just this kind of thing that's kind of switched at some point.
Yeah, certainly. And it is especially these personal items that might trip you up when you're thinking again of, okay, what are all these sounds that could have happened on the battlefield, right? You're not thinking about tiny bells. That is not the first thing that comes to your mind. But something...
you'd be so angry if those bells gave you up. If it was actually like a nighttime battle and it was just a sneaking raid and you forgot they were there and your little bells went off and you're just like, Oh. And everyone's like, yeah, people behind you are like, those fucking bells. Take those bells off.
Thorstein, what did we tell you about them bells? Get them in.
What the hell, man?
I told you not to bring them.
It's like, I forgot.
Yeah.
But that's kind of fun on like the topic of camp too, Dan. Again, I understand, Felix, that this is not something that you would be able to answer or like necessarily give any insight into. But on the topic of camp, I do wonder if some of the sounds that they are referring to and contemporaneously, if we actually had samples of those sounds, like the types of horns or like the blaring noises, or if there are any sounds that to our modern ears would actually sound kind of silly or camp or funny. Like when you imagine like a horn blowing, you imagine something kind of like deep and like very like da-da type of thing. What if it's just like a little, that to us would be like, what is that, an iPhone alarm? What's happening? But that it would, of course, like, you know, have enough bearing to be heard, but that the sound itself to us would be a bit like, this is not as dramatic and cinematographic. Like, this is not as, you know, Lord of the Rings-y as I pictured that it would be.
That is, of course, one of the problems that when you're dealing with a war setting, it's like how much can you even discern the sounds? Because that is, again, talking about methodology, you are dealing here with what is called like a hi-fi environment, where you're just basically hit with a wall of noise without you being necessarily able to discern what type of noise you are dealing with, because it all gets just mushed into this wall of noise, and then the directionality of it.
But they must be able to pick out the lures.
Certainly.
And also, that just got me thinking of like, they would have to have different pitches, not only for different groups within your own army. Like you said, it's not all equal. Some are more dispensable than others. So you'd have to, I assume, different sounds that would be alarmed for different groups that would go in at different times. So your ear would have to be trained for that, but also the opposition would have to have a different pitch and sound, because everyone's ears can't. So I guess it's like with dog whistles, you can't have the dogs trained to the exact same pitch of whistle, because otherwise they're going to do the same command to the same whistle. If you want to have two dogs doing two different acts, and that's got me thinking even further of, I wonder if there's a tactic of if you could get the lure that the other guys have, and you could like just completely fuck up their plans by sounding a lure that their lure made, and you know you got the
capture the flag, it's capture the lure.
Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like it could work because their ears must be trained to it to a degree.
Yeah, or to some degree, you just know the commands of the enemy army, and then you can read them.
Mm-hmm.
If you are familiar with, for instance, how a charge is sounded, then you know what to expect. Mm-hmm. Again, going into this kind of, you know, mind gamey part of warfare.
But if you could sound a charge without it being sounded from the other side, that feels like it could be quite beneficial.
Yeah, most certainly.
I think that.
I love that you've opened up this new avenue of thought for us, Felix. I enjoy it much.
I haven't opened up. I just have it brought from German medieval studies into.
Well, sure, but you've opened it up for us specifically because, but it's kind of no. But here's the thing, though, because this is yet again a field where I'm like, when I start to think about it, I'm like, well, no shit, but because it hasn't necessarily been actively talked about, or, you know, pun intended, made any noise of, then thank you, I'm very proud of that one.
We have acknowledged it.
Yes. Then you don't necessarily think about it, because it's kind of just like, if you're not made aware, then it's easy to just kind of forget about that aspect. Like many other things, like, for example, color or what have you.
sometimes there are obvious things that until somebody points it out, you don't kind of see, or you overlook. Like sounds, we all know what sounds are, and we probably take for granted because we hear them every day. So you never really. There's so much other stuff to look at in the Viking Age that you just kind of don't think about it. And then when you point it out, I've just sat here for this whole hour and a half, kind of going, yeah, but what about this noise? And what about that noise? And how do they differentiate between that one and this one? And what about these other? And I'm thinking about it on a completely different level, which I love. I love that when it's something that is completely different that makes me just kind of start to analyze things that I've never really done before. And I've just kind of overlooked, going, oh yeah, they probably have like a sound for this. And that's been the deepest I've gone with it, rather than giving it some real thought of like how it would all work.
Sure. Or you might not have even thought about too much, right? Because at some point, Scandinavia is Christianized.
Story of my life, that Felix.
No. It's just like, for instance, you don't really think about it too much, right? For instance, as I was saying, it's like at some point Scandinavia becomes Christianized, right? And then you're getting churches. How much do you think about church bells?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How much? It's just like you assume that they are there. But unless you really start looking for them, it is just like something that is cataloged way back. And it's like, yeah, churches, they exist, sure. Just roll with it. And so...
I think it was Claire Moulet who said, back on one of this was years ago on the podcast, and I'd never thought of it in this way at all. I always thought of church bells as being quite pleasant. They're quite a nice thing. The church bell rings, maybe service is on, or what time it is. When she was saying about how it's like a dominance thing, that it's almost like a Christian or like a way of having that impeding into people's lives and being almost like an invasive sound that people can't turn off. You have this bell ringing, and it's like a reminder all the time that the church is there, that you are Christian, do godly things, I guess, and stay on the. It's like this thing that's there though, and it's very much an invasive act. Whereas today I'm like, yeah, church bells are quite nice. That's sweet. But they have that other function that maybe you don't always think of, and that sound of just like...
Depends on your frame of reference, right? How you choose to interpret the fact that it's even there. Like, is it... Yeah, many... Like, one thing can be many things at once.
And to different people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a Christian, you'd probably hear the bells and they were very nice. If you maybe weren't, you might have the other opinions.
It's like Sunday morning, 11 p.m. It's like, I just had my morning coffee and now my day is ruined because of church bells.
Yet again.
Yet again.
Yeah. I like church bells. Just to put that into... I do. I live near a church and I occasionally hear them and I think they're quite nice. They do make me smile. Maybe not nice. Maybe not if I lived right next door to them. That can be quite annoying.
It can be real loud.
I'm far enough away where they travel to me and I can kind of pick them out, but they're never going to like keep you up.
But speaking of sound, what kind of my favorite, this again is a tangent, but like just working off of that, my favorite thing as a kid, so for just for reference, Felix, my parents are both priests, so I've spent my fair time in churches growing up, and my favorite thing was being able to like go up into the bell tower, and then sometimes people would actually be swinging them, but sometimes you also have like motorized kind of automated bell systems. But my favorite thing was the noise of the rope and the swinging of the bell before it started clanging. So you would hear like the whoosh, ding.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Like I loved being able to hear kind of like the right before you heard it ring. So, but I also imagine like those are also, there are, you were talking about kind of the more intense sounds of battle too, but you also have, I mean, that could be intense too, but it wouldn't necessarily be as in your face, but like the whooshing of arrows can also be pretty visceral. Like just the sense of an arrow going and like hearing that kind of quick.
I feel like if you're hearing the arrow That's going to be intense.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking that's really fucking close to me if I've heard that come past. I'm just going to quickly run for a wee. I'm so sorry. You two can carry on.
It's not only that the arrow makes a sound, right? But also the bowstring makes a sound. The arrow leaving the bowstring makes a sound. The arrow hitting whatever it hits makes a sound, whether this is the earth, the shield, the human flesh. And especially then, of course, the time of the battle is very important, right? Because it might be just in the twilight. And when you then hear arrows, I think that is way more frightening than when you can see where they're fired from.
Mm-hmm.
When you just suddenly hear like, it's like, okay.
Oh no.
Oh no, it's like, oh yeah.
It's like,
I'm in trouble.
It's like duck under the nearest bush. Yeah. Fuck. Oh man, that has got to be intimidating as all heck. But also, like, for example, again, that would severely impact how arrows would fly. But I also then imagine, weather, because sometimes I catch myself thinking about, warfare and kind of like every battle somehow being set in this kind of just like not really summer, not really spring, but like some sort of like clear skies, not necessarily very sunny, but like this very like weather, like environment wise, very like neutral ground. But I'd be like, there would probably be wind, maybe it would be fall, so that it would be like super rainy and slippery, and like even if it isn't completely winter, like we're talking Scandinavia and Iceland, so cold. And just the kind of how would the battle progress depending on how cloudy it was, or whether you had the sun directly in your face and kind of the heat, or whether it, like you said earlier, Felix, would like if it was twilight, all of these environmental factors too. And then you add in the combination of sound, because weather can also make a lot of sound.
Yeah, I think that is a very nice description. I think it's in the Jomsvikinga saga when the Jomsvikings, they are fighting and they are summoning forth what's her name, Þorgerður Hölgabrúður or something, and she just appears then in the midst of the battle and she fires arrows from her nails that are basically fingers, right? Like, and it is described in this very basically like a hailstorm, like a very like wintry, like as though the weather had changed all of a sudden. And she fires arrows, so the weather apparently has an impact personified as this figure, and she kills people. And whenever the side that summons her is like basically a bit waning in their devotion to her, the storm slackens, and then they have to keep it up again in order to finally win the battle or not. So weather has certainly an effect, of course, right? If you fight in the fog or in the shade, right, it makes a difference.
Yeah, I think it was the Battle of Towton, which is like a big battle in
Edward III, right?
Yeah, it was a big battle of like the Battle of the War of the Roses. And I'm pretty sure that was fought in snow.
Oh,
yeah.
Or like snow had like a big, like it was like really early. Like I think they got up at like 4:00 ish to get like an early start to kind of like get to take the enemy by surprise. And I'm pretty sure it was snowy and horrible and just kind of, which must have personified the violence of having everything white. But I'm pretty sure that was like in snow, and it was just, I just find every time I kind of hear that, I'm just like, oh, it's horrible. Like, kind of, it must have been.
I don't want to change with any of the blokes then.
I don't know, it would just be
miserable experience. Yeah.
I was just trying to see if I could find it. It was
that does sound pretty miserable.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain it was like all the paintings are snowy, so I don't think they've done that for
dramatic effect.
For dramatic effect, yeah. I think I think it was. But yeah, it must make such a difference. And then that's kind of get me thinking again of this sound ritual aspect of controlling weather in a battle. If you, I don't know, it's thunder or lightning, could that be maybe Thor? And you've kind of brought that about and having like those sounds and rituals to kind of bring that on. I don't know. It's really interesting.
Or at least you can try to bring it on, right?
Yeah. And if it doesn't, then it's not with you.
Well, I mean, of course, then you can say it's like, maybe Thor is just, out in the east killing Jotnar, and I'm like, it's like, he's busy. Yeah, he's a busy man.
He's busy. He has like an out of office like auto reply.
Yeah, don't contact me between.
Yeah, he's at stuff at that moment. Felix, is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything you want to? I
think we have covered all the bases, right? I mean, I'm quite happy. Is there something you want to discuss more?
No, I'm content, but I just didn't know whether we'd maybe missed an area. It's definitely made me expand my mind a little bit and think differently on this, which is, I guess, the goal. So I'm sure those who listen to this will also have that thought of maybe just.
Well, I hope
stepping back a degree and actually thinking about the sounds that would be at play.
Well, that would be very great if that would have happened. But yeah, no, I think I'm also very happy.
That's good.
Perfect. Mags, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, here's the thing. I always do, but I'm going to restrain myself. If there's more stuff, I'll try to remember it for the Q&A. Because now my brain's just working in hyperdrive because I'm like, but all the sounds are so interesting. Oh my God.
Yeah. So all right, so we'll wrap this up and then we'll do a little bit extra as our Q&A, Felix. So if you want to hear more, pop over to Patreon /Nordic Mythology Podcast. You get all the Q&As on that lowest tier as well. So go and check that out, and you'll hear the kind of extended part where the Q&As are always more fun. I would not always say more fun, but they're fun because I feel like guests kind of let their hair down. Do you feel that too, Mags? They're a little bit more light
because we're warmed up, right?
Yeah, so they're always good. Go and check those out. Sometimes they last as long as the main show because we get stuck talking. So yeah, they're definitely worth it. But with that said, we'll wrap up the main show. Felix, where can people find you? I don't know how much of a public image you want to have put out there.
Well, I mean, you can just Google my name. I think I've yet to meet another Felix Lummer, so.
Nice.
There's that.
One person in the world name club. Woo! Me too.
Yay! Woo! Well, I can't say that for sure, but apparently not in Old Norse studies at least. So
awesome.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Blue Sky. Of course, because I teach at the university, it's just like I have an academia account, so it's like I'm there. I'm just not the best at doing Facebook and all this kind of social media, but I try to get back to people when they message me.
Perfect. Mags, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at ArcheoMags, Archeo with a K.
Wonderful. I'm trying to see if I can find another Felix Lummer, but I'm struggling. For me, it's Daniel_Fire1, Horns of Odin for the business, and then Nordic Mythology Podcast across the board. Hit the little like, subscribe, bell button on YouTube. You can see all our pretty faces on there as well if you watch. And that's it. Thank you very much.